This episode, types of fasteners. Wow! When you walk in the big box store and you enter the fastener aisle, holy smokes, are there a million different fasteners? And what in the heck are all of these things used for? Well, in this episode, the Handyman Pros are going to do an overview on fasteners. Welcome to the Handyman Pros radio show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros radio show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled Types of Fasteners. Wow! To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what have you been doing this week?
Yeah, well, what have I been doing? Greetings, Earthlings. Yeah, what have I been doing? What have I been doing this week? Well, you know, I took, let me go back a little bit, is that kind of took my own advice, and our tip was that I actually aerated my yard this past week. So, you know, that was quite a mess. It had been raining here a lot.
Yes, it has.
And then it stopped. Okay, and the ground kind of cleared up a little, hardened up a little bit. And I got out with the aerator and I aerated the yard and I overseeded the yard. And it was just perfect timing, because right after I got done with it, the next 2 days we had a mild rainfall that just lasted for like 2 days. So it was like perfect. I was like, man, I couldn't have hit that any better. So I'm anticipating that I'll probably have a pretty decent looking lawn, starting in the fall. And then it'll be, next spring it's gonna look great. So, and then it'll burn out. It's just like because I'm too cheap to water it.
Welcome to living in the South.
Yeah,
right?
welcome to that. So that's kind of what I've been, what I did last week. So that was, after I got through, that was quite a mess, anyways, with mud all over the place. But it's done, so it feels good to get that done.
It is done. Well, this week I actually was doing some work on one of our rental houses. I put in new LVP flooring into the home. Remember, we don't do flooring, John. Just remember, I am still nursing my sore body and knees. Right, aspirin is my friend these days. But one of the things that came up in this job, as it were, if you want to call it that, was that we had some transitions to do. And so I actually refurbished the transition pieces that were there. They had some oak pieces that were in the house that they were going from hardwood to hardwood. And was it hardwood to hardwood? Yeah, well, actually it was tile to hardwood. Anyway, neither here nor there. They had some transitions. So I refurbished all those. They had an old stain on them that was kind of ugly, and it had paint on it and blah, blah, blah. So I took the sander and I sanded these things off. Well, I then wanted to attach them. I really refurbished them. I made them look really nice. They came out really beautiful. And so I wanted to attach them to the floor without showing large screws. And I didn't really want to glue them, because if we need to, do any kind of repair or anything, they need to be removable. So I used what are called finishing screws, and it actually lends into our topic for this week.
Yeah.
We received an email from James Burton, and James gave us a tremendous number of ideas for shows, which, by the way, James, we are working on a lot of those ideas as we speak. But the one that we kind of landed on first was talking about the types of fasteners and when to use them and when not to. And when we approach this, John, and you and I discussed this before the show, but we approach this, it's like you walk into the fastener aisle in one of the big box stores, and I don't know about you, but it's pretty overwhelming. It's a whole aisle, right? I mean, it's the whole aisle.
Yeah, and that's just the start of it. Really,
right.
That's just the start of it, because that's, from the homeowner perspective, there's a certain amount, and there's a lot of fasteners. So absolutely. And it's overwhelming. Even, when we were talking about it, even now when I walk in, to that aisle, it's like wow, I really have to be. I have to be focused.
Very focused, yeah, because there's too many choices, right? There's so many choices and too many choices, basically.
Yeah, and I don't want to stand there like, I don't know what I'm doing, of course. So,
are you trying to tell us something, John?
Head, and all the other guys like, come on, move over. I need these number 16 penny nails. But from our perspective, we do a lot of different things all the time. So we're looking at, sometimes when I go into the fastener aisle, I'll tell you, the truth be known is that I'm looking at different types of jobs that I just want to stock back up on some fasteners.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Because from our perspective, on any given day, we really don't know which fasteners we truly need. I know that's my case anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm saying is that you just need to have a variety. I don't need a whole lot of one thing, but I need a bunch of little things.
A bunch of different types. Yeah.
So it was one of those things, but it is intimidating, right? You walk down that thing and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the basic types of nails, or basic types of fasteners, right? So when we're talking about fasteners, what we're talking about is joining two pieces of material, which is a part of this conversation that we'll have later. And folks, just so you understand, we're not going to get into depth on any one particular type of fastener. In our conversation before the show, what we decided we're going to do is, this is going to be the overview show, and then what we'll do, and we won't do this in a real series, but we're going to do this as individual shows that we'll do in the future. We're going to have a show on, just for example, nails, and a show on screws, because in each of these subcategories, there's a tremendous, believe it or not, there's a tremendous amount of information that goes into each type of these fasteners based on the job that you're trying to do. So, with that said, what we want to do is give a quick overview, John. What are some of the types of fasteners that we're talking about?
Man, we're talking from the perspective of what you're going to see in the aisles and at like a big box store. You're talking nails.
And there's subtypes of nails.
Finishing nails, framing nails, screws. You got exterior, interior, nuts and bolts, hex bolts, lag bolts, carrots. I'm just going down the list, and this is coming off of one of the big box store websites.
There's glue, there's tape, there's anchors,
there's
rivets, there's stainless steel, there's metric, there's
staples,
there's
pins,
just
rings, clips,
on and on and on and on.
Bungee cords. I mean, there's like it just goes on. It goes on and on and on, and and I think too, one of the James was alluding to, what kind of fasteners to use and when, and I think what we were talking about is really what we both do is when you go in to get them, you really have your consideration of what you want to do.
Right, and what are you attaching? What is the goal, right? What is the whole idea? And we always talk about this, we talk about planning like pre-planning, right? But you get into that fastener aisle, and because there are specialty fasteners, we'll call them, they really are specialty fasteners. There's certain, like for example, we'll talk a little bit about, just quickly talk about concrete fasteners. That's a whole subset, and it can be very, very intimidating if you don't know what you're talking about. But kind of our goal here is we're going to talk about what you're trying to fasten together, and then when we do that, we're going to talk about what you should be thinking about as a type, and we're going to put some real examples out as well. So we decided we'd talk about some actual examples so that you have an idea that you're not just hanging out there going, well, I don't know, I'm trying to put this and this together. So when we talk about that, John, where do we want to start with that?
Well, I think what you're, let's take a couple of examples of what we all commonly do around the house. Let's start from the outside. It's just a deck. You're going to put, wood to wood, right?
Wood to wood. And in this case, it would probably be pressure-treated wood to pressure-treated wood.
So therein lies another little twist, another little curveball, because you just said it's pressure-treated wood. So, I like to use screws on the outside on the deck. Okay, I don't use nails on the deck anymore.
No,
they just keep popping up, right? So a lot of your older decks out there are going to be nailed down. So I'm sure a lot of listeners out there, you're walking on the deck and you're like, uh-oh, there's a trip hazard. Here comes the board. It's starting to pop up. The nails are pulling up. Well, here's an example of, you go down to that aisle and you want to find the proper screws to put in there to draw that board back down. So, and I know, Larry, that those kind of screws are certain deck screws.
Yeah, they're actually called deck screws.
That's right. That can take the outdoor environment, as well as that the wood doesn't corrode that screw.
Yeah,
that's
the chemical
another thing
composition of the wood is, or in this case, it's actually the chemical composition of the pressure treat material.
That's right.
The chemicals they use to pressure treat the wood. But yeah, keep
right.
going.
And it's kind of funny, for instance, if you go out and you use the wrong screws or the wrong nails, and when they used to use nails and things like that, and they still do, that wood will eat the nail up.
And we've pulled how many of those out? About
I'm
a billion.
Telling you,
yeah.
I'm telling you, it's. I can't tell you how many times I've pulled out a piece of wood off a deck, and the screws the nails are gone.
They're eaten away, literally eaten away. And
yeah.
and that's what using the wrong nails are. Now, why do they use the wrong nails in a construction's case? Well, A, they're less expensive. B, it's out of warranty. I don't care. I'll put this, because it takes, I don't know, it's got to take 4 or 5 years before those nails get eaten up. It doesn't happen overnight. It's nothing like that. But at the same time, it's not the long-term solution, right? And we're all about getting that value for the dollar. Like, my position is, I want you to do the job once, and basically until the thing rots apart, you're not changing. You're not worried about the screw coming out again. That's my opinion, right? And
right.
I think that's your opinion as well, John.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. So when we talk about this, one thing too is, remember too, one of the other things, and this is for us, this is a real challenge, right? Is what length of screw do you get for a particular application? Because the lengths are, they're anywhere from, well, basically in screws, you can get them at a ½ inch long to, I don't know, 4 inches maybe,
Sure.
On a true screw, not a lag bolt, on a screw. But, which length you use, well, just depends on, the thickness of the material that you're putting together, and what's the condition of the wood that you're screwing into, right? So on this deck board example, if you've got I did this on, remember, John, when I was doing my deck and I was putting down the screws, and we had a bit of, I wouldn't say it was rot, but the wood was degrading a little bit on the top, and on the very top, probably the top inch of the wood was starting to degrade a little bit. Now, this is a 25-year-old deck that had been stained and stuff. It was well maintained, but I started using longer screws, because as I got down through about that first 1 inch, the wood became really solid, like it really grabbed. You could actually feel it in the screw gun. You could feel the difference. And so, because I didn't want to replace my whole deck, aka $30,000, by the way, right? There's a whole long story behind that, folks, that we won't tell you about. But anyway, it's now a retaining wall and a paver top. But we'll get into that one of these years. But anyway, I'm replacing that, and I use longer screws, and lo and behold, it tightened those boards up perfectly. So that's a consideration to be worried about, is the length of the screw. You want to use a long enough screw, but you generally don't need to use too long a screw either at the same time. So longer is not always better. Do you agree with that, John?
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And kind of the moral of the story is your once again, you're going back to the consideration. What are you doing? What is it that the goal is here to do? Now we're not talking about rehabbing rebuilding the whole deck. This is a maintenance thing. So you're right. If there's a little bit of rotten wood, or it's just kind of deteriorating on top, use a longer screw. Generally when I'm out there, I'm using like 2.5 or 3 inch screws, that I'm putting on the board again.
Johnny's deck boards are never coming off.
Yeah, they're
never.
not coming. Yeah, they're not coming. They're not coming back out. I'll tell you that much. And I had to replace a bunch of boards out there. So that's generally what you're gonna wind up with. Some of those projects. For the audience out there that's listening, you're gonna do some maintenance on your deck, and if it's me, I'm using screws. If you are going to use nails, then you have to buy the specific nails that aren't going to get eaten away. Don't forget, either way, the screws or the nails that are going to get eaten away by a pressure-treated wood. Now, you're not going to really have to worry about that putting together interior lumber, just regular 2x2s,
right,
or 2x4s,
right.
But but there are certain considerations. So when the question comes up is what kind of fasteners to use and where, that's an example of just be cognizant of what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and one other thing too is if you're doing anything in an exterior, and I don't care if it's fencing or whatever, it doesn't necessarily have to be pressure treated, but you do want to understand that these are steel and they will rust. Now, most of the time, if you're doing an exterior, you want some sort of a galvanized entity, right? So that it doesn't actually rust. And so both nails and screws come in a galvanized furs. They're the gray. It's that gray color. And by the way, all this stuff is more expensive, but it isn't what you pay. It's what you get. And trust me, if you ever have to take a screw out or even a nail, taking a rusted nail out is not a lot of fun because most of the time it's going to break. And then you have just a whole bunch of issues with that. And so if you use good galvanized stuff, man, it'll back right out. It doesn't get the screw heads don't get rusted up and stuff like that. So that's part of the other thing. It's interior versus exterior. Inside where you don't have or where you shouldn't have water, let's put it that way, where you shouldn't have water, you generally don't have that issue. So you can use just a less expensive non-galvanized type nail or screw if you're attaching something simple like that. So again, little things that maybe you never really understood it, but hopefully this shines some light on that. And what else? Let's talk about, does that cover deck boards, John?
Well, yeah, sure. When you're out there and you're looking around, you're going to notice different types of fasteners on different portions of the deck.
Right.
We just talked about the nails and we talked about the screws on the deck boards themselves, but you're also going to now look at bigger fasteners that are really holding the superstructure together. You're going to see big bolts. You're going to see lag bolts and things like that.
You're going to see hanger joists, right? Which is a way of attaching the pieces together. That's like a framework part. Yep.
Right. So when you start to look around, you're going to start to see all these different fasteners, and you'll see that they're used in different places. So when you do go down to the aisle and you're looking around and you're saying, "Whoa, what is all this stuff?" You're going to get kind of an idea. Oh yeah. I saw that one on the real underlying structure of my deck, and here's some of the smaller ones that I can use on the deck board, So you're starting to get like you're getting a sense of where all these things are being used.
Right, and that's really important. All right, so that's decks, yeah, and we're just talking about replacing deck boards in this conversation, not doing any superstructure issues because that's its own. There's a whole bunch of different fasteners. We'll get into that in the future. That's a kind of a part of a different show is what that'll be. So, like we said. So one of the other things I think that we've talked about a lot that people do in their home is they hang items on the wall, John, right? People hang pictures, they hang shelves, they hang mirrors, they hang, I don't know, their children, or at least that's just me. Yeah. I usually use a big hook when I do that, but anyway, right. That's
I tell you that this is where people will get themselves in trouble.
Yes.
Once again, you go down to the fastener aisle and you're going to see a bunch of different, and this can be quite confusing. And I see a lot of people standing there staring for a long time at the specific me. and there's a specific little section in the fastener aisle where it has just all the stuff, all the little fasteners and things to hang pictures, and you have to be really careful of how those things are being hung and what kind of force is being generated. Is it straight down, or is it being pulled off the wall like on a shelf? So I think we've talked about this in the past, but from a fastener perspective, is that you really want to understand how to fasten those things on the wall, because as you know, people out there, Larry and I just talked about this before the show, in things in terms of like closets. If you're hanging stuff up in closets and you're putting your clothes on, it's a lot of weight. And I think we've all experienced those things starting to pull off the wall or even pull right out of the wall.
Yep. Been there, done that, right? Been there, done that. And that's largely, again, it's partially just the fastener system. It's not really the proper fastener system for a heavy weight
That's right.
for the amount of weight that you're actually putting on those types of shelving into. Now we're talking too. One other thing is the consideration of your wall type. Right now, when we're making this discussion right now, we're largely talking about drywall. And so drywall is gypsum board. It's basically paper with gypsum particles in between, and then it's nailed up to the wall, up to studs in your wall. And gypsum is strong, but it's not that strong. Would you agree with that, John? I mean, it's,
no, absolutely.
You know, it's
Absolutely.
strong. And so again, when you're heavy, when you're hanging, you know, heavy versus light things on a wall, if you have a stud finder, or if you have a way to determine if you can see where the nails are in the drywall and you can find the studs, if you're hanging something really heavy, and that goes for, in my opinion, shelves, or I like to hang televisions on the studs. I don't like to do them in the drywall.
You got to hang them on. And we did a show on
that. Yep.
We did that. So you can go back and listen to that. But just to recap, that is always always put those things in the studs. Don't even think about doing it any other way. I'll tell you that, you know, you're talking about hanging stuff that's the heavy versus light. For the light things, I'll tell you, there's a fastener out there that I love to use, and it looks like it's a little nail, and it goes in at 45 degrees and has a little hook on it. It looks almost like a pin.
Yep.
Those things are fantastic for hanging pictures, and they will really, you know, because the weight is coming straight down. Okay, it's not 90 degrees, not coming off the wall like a shelf, if you will. You know, but it's coming straight down, so they will hold a lot of weight. And if you ever have to move the picture, you've had a little pinhole in the drywall.
Just a pinhole.
And that fastener, they are a little bit more expensive, but they're great for that, especially if you're renting a house or you're an apartment or whatever. You know, it just puts a little tiny hole in the wall.
Yeah.
So, you know, that, you know, it's from what to use and where to use it. Those things are, you know, fantastic. When you get to something that needs a little bit more weight, you know, we were talking about hanging maybe a mirror, bigger mirrors. You know, now we're talking about, you know, maybe 30 pounds on up. Then you might want to start to consider using those some other types of anchors. And I've used them pretty successfully in the you know, the ones that you actually the big plastic ones that just actually screw themselves into the drywall.
Walls. Yeah, there's a
and
whole
then you
series
put a
of
screw.
them.
Yeah, and then you put a screw into those.
Right.
So you can actually I take them on a drill, you know, and just put them on the wall and zip them in, and then I can put a screw in there and I can hang things, and they'll hang. I think they hang up to, you know, what, 80 pounds, maybe something.
Yeah. Check the packaging. So
yeah,
the packaging
check the packaging.
will tell you how much
there's
weight.
different ones. And you know, just once again, I know I've said it a number of times here, but you know, if the weight is just falling straight down the wall, then you're golden. If you're attaching anything else like a television, no, don't do that. I've seen professional guys use those big zip strips and whatever those things are, you know, to put into the wall. They're big nylon. They're fasteners.
They're actually T-fasteners, and they work.
Yeah,
that's well. But
right, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, that's what they are. And I wouldn't settle for that.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where now I've done it because you have no other choice, you know. But it's really, for me, that's a last resort. And same thing with using the toggle bolts that are wings, you know, winged toggle bolts, which are great for pretty heavy things. But if we've got you know, we talked about in our television show, an arm moving television that comes out on an arm actually has motion left and right and up and down on an arm that sticks out off the wall, has what's called a moment on it. Yeah, I don't like putting anything into the drywall to hold a moment, because it's just leverage, folks. It's just basically, you know, it's the farther out off the wall it is, it's just the heavier it becomes and the more it pulls off. And we don't want to get it. We've already done that show, so we're not really going to talk about that. But the point here is that there are different fasteners, and a lot of it just has to do with how much weight you're talking about, and then where that weight actually distributes. And if it distributes straight down, you're good. If you're going to hang a shelf, you know, again, really best to try to find a stud for like a 90-degree bracket. If you're going to hang a shelf, put a bracket in there, and put the screws. Usually you use a long screw and put it right into the stud, and then that way you're actually hooked to the superstructure of the house, and so the chances of it falling down are less. Mirrors and things, are different, but a mirror is still pretty heavy. But to your point, John, that weight goes straight down, and it goes straight down against the fastener, and then that changes the equation, right?
Right.
And so it works in that case. So that's that. Is there anything else on wall hanging, John? Is there anything?
No,
did we cover everything pretty much?
No, I think we had another show on really that kind of stuff, and just from the fastener standpoint. So once again, if you kind of put yourself in the aisle of one of these big box stores, and you're looking down that aisle and saying, "Whoa," you're going to run into first thing I can picture right now is I get in there and I hit where all the nails are. So there's a variety of different nails. Then I get to the screws. Okay. The screws might be on the other side. And then I get, go back to the other side. And then there's all the things for the walls. And so just know when you look at the package, how much they hold, what you're trying to do, what the goal is and what you're trying to accomplish there. So when the question comes up of what fasteners to use where, you kind of have a good sense of what's going to last.
Yeah.
Don't go cheap on it by any means. Don't, but that's my advice right there for that. But
so we're big proponents of using screws, largely because there are the tremendous advantages that screws offer and that they don't back out and things like that. But we did want to give a last example, right, John?
Yeah, and I just did want to say that the reason that I use screws now all the time is because now we all have cordless
screw guns. That's right.
And so it's not a big deal, and screws are far superior to nails. So that being said,
there are those applications where nails are superior to screws.
That's right.
And
that's right.
We wanted to use one that we think some of you out there might have done, and that's, have you ever installed trim? So I just did this flooring job, and I have yet to install the trim, but it's coming. It's the next step in my flooring, my job on this flooring job. And the trim is I'm putting quarter round down, and quarter round is just what it says. It's quarter round trim. It's a half round with a 90-degree angle on it. And I've just found whenever I do trim, I use my nail gun, which I happen to have a nail gun, but even before I had a nail gun, I always like to use a finishing nail. And it is a place where nails are superior. There are the finishing screws, but they get very, very pricey, and
you don't need to,
and you just don't need that kind of attachment.
No.
It doesn't need to be that strong. Now, I told the story at the beginning of this show where I used them for my thresholds, but why did I use them for the thresholds? Because people walk on that, and they drag their, they kick it, they drag their feet over the threshold, not on purpose, but you just do it. It's just a part of moving back and forth through the thing. So that needed to be really, really strong, aka the screws. But for most of my quarter round trim, actually all of my trim, I just use a nail gun, or I use a nail in a nail set, and I'd use a finishing nail. And John, explain a finishing nail. What is a finishing nail, so that people understand?
Finishing nail is just it's a smaller nail. It can be different size. It can actually be a pretty good sized nail actually, but it has a very small head on it that you can just bury it into the material.
Yeah, and then caulk it over so you don't even see it, right?
Right, you just take a nail set, which is like another nail, if you will, and just tap it in, and it'll bury the head of that nail into the material, and then you can, caulk it over, put putty on it, whatever you'd like to do, but the nail disappears is the bottom line.
AKA finishing nail, right?
Yeah,
as
exactly.
The name implies.
Exactly. Versus, what you'll typically see when you go into the big box store again is you'll see the common looking nails with the big heads on them, for like framing nails and those kind of things, So that'll distinguish between the two.
Right, and the idea here is that the reason that I like to use these nails is I can use the nail gun for these, and a lot of that is so because the floors are generally never perfectly square. You can push it down and actually set it with the nail gun and shoot the nail in, and you can actually do that by hand too if you use a hammer. You can do the same thing. It just gives you the ability to do it a little faster, and then it just disappears. And so for trim work, really, I still use in almost all my trim, I use finishing nails, and so they have a small head. It's all the things that we just described. So those are just 3 examples of things that are kind of common, at least in our world. We think they're kind of common. And again, if you have any questions or anything, but we are going to do, like I said, we're going to do an ongoing series of shows on fasteners. Now, it's not going to be a sequential series, so it's not going to be the next show that you hear. But somewhere in the future, we're going to talk about some specialty fasteners and some things that you might look at those in the big box store and say, what does this concrete anchor actually do, and how and where would I use it, and how do I actually put that thing in there? So that's just an example of some of the shows that we're going to talk about.
Right.
So with that, John, is there anything else we wanted to discuss about fasteners?
No, I think it's a good start. I think if you take away anything from this when you're in the aisle, kind of look around, understand what the consideration is, what you're trying to do, what kind of materials that you're trying to put together. And there is a fastener for everything. Let's put it that way. So
for everything.
Just from the start here, just kind of take away from this conversation that part of it, and then that way you're gonna for the folks out there just getting started using all these different things, you're gonna start to know, hey, this is where these kind of fasteners are used, where they're not going to perform and that kind of thing. So. And like you said, Larry, as we go on, we'll talk about these in a different show.
Yeah, it's a series of specialized shows that'll discuss. I mean, we could talk for hours just on screws.
Yeah,
with the various numbers of screws. It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, y'all know if you've been out there, y'all know. So
yeah, I had a whole class on this stuff when I went to aviation school. I mean, it's crazy. Not nails and this kind of stuff, but there's fasteners for everything.
And different kind of things. John, I wonder how they fasten together a spaceship.
I don't know. It's probably not nailed together.
Well, maybe you know what? When we see one, do you think we could find out? Could we take that bad boy apart?
With a claw hammer.
With a claw hammer. Folks, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. Go to our website, leave us a message. That's at handymanprosradioshow.com. Our Facebook group is at Handyman Pros. You can leave a message. You can do all kinds of things, but we appreciate you listening, and we will talk to you next week. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've enjoyed this podcast and have derived some value from it, here's 4 things you can do. 1, tell your friends about this podcast. 2, hit subscribe on your podcast player. While you're there, leave us a review. 3, subscribe to our newsletter by going to handymanprosradioshow.com and click on the subscribe button. We'll inform you of upcoming events, shows, and give you actionable tips for maintaining your home and property. And 4, send us an email with your questions to questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. That's handymanprosradioshow.com. That's our show for this week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.